Hi, I'm Isolde. My sister uninvited me to her wedding. Said I wasn't really family. But that wasn't the worst part. Worse was how they still asked me to pay for the wedding. How they used a lullaby my mother sang just to make it theirs. How my dad told the neighbors I ruined it all, just to save face. They erased me with a smile, a soft tone, a polite exclusion that cut sharper than hate. And yet, they still expected my silence. What would you have done? I didn't expect anything special that Saturday afternoon. The sun filtered lazily through the curtains of my small apartment in Richmond, casting golden squares on the hardwood floor. I was curled up on the love seat, cradling my tea in both hands, letting the warmth seep into my fingers. The stillness, the quiet, it was comforting. For once, everything felt settled. At 30, I wasn't chasing dreams anymore. I had a decent career designing interiors for homes I couldn't afford to live in. I had 2 close friends who never asked too many questions, and I had carved out a version of peace where I didn't expect anything from the people who shared my blood, especially not my father's new family. Then, while scrolling through Instagram stories, a name popped up. Erin, my old college roommate. We hadn't talked in months, maybe a year, but she was still following some of the same people from my past. And there it was, her story playing on loop, a video of women laughing around a table, champagne flutes clinking, balloons spelling out, bride-to-be. In the middle of it, dressed in white lace and wearing a tiara, was my half-sister, Nadine. Text over the video read, "Bridal brunch with the bride-to-be # Nadine Voss wedding." I stared at the screen, thumb frozen above the phone. My heartbeat stuttered, just for a moment. A wedding? Her wedding? I hadn't received a call. No email, no, "Hey, just so you know." Nothing. Not even a forwarded invite that got lost in the mail. I locked my phone and set it face down on the coffee table. For a while I just sat there, my chest tightening like someone had laced invisible ropes around it and started to pull. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was a party for someone else. Maybe... I opened the phone again and typed a message to Dad. "Hi, just saw something about Nadine's bridal shower. Is she getting married?" The message showed as delivered. No response. I waited an hour, then 2. By the time the sun dipped behind the line of rooftops across the street, my screen was still blank. I tried calling, straight to voicemail. That night, lying in bed with the lights off, I thought about every single dinner I had been left out of, every birthday I didn't know about until weeks later, every Sunday call that turned short the moment Marjorie's voice was heard in the background. And now, this. The next morning, I texted a former coworker, who happened to be distantly connected to Marjorie's circle. She replied within minutes. "Oh yeah, Nadine's getting married next month. Didn't you know? Thought everyone did." No, everyone didn't. I didn't. I could have left it there. I could have swallowed the bitterness like I always did and kept my head down. But something cracked. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was something quieter, like disbelief turning into a slow burn. 3 days later, a text popped up. It was from Nadine. "Don't worry about the wedding. You're not invited. You're not really family, Isolde." I didn't breathe. I reread it 3 times. "You're not invited. You're not really family." I sat in silence. My tea had gone cold. The walls of my apartment felt tighter somehow, pressing in like I didn't belong in my own skin. How could someone say that like it was a weather update? Not a single sorry, not a question, just deletion. I stood up slowly and walked to my bookshelf. On the top was a photo frame, one I hadn't touched in years. My mother's face smiled back at me, that slight, knowing smile she always wore when she knew something I didn't. Her dark curls framed her soft eyes, the same eyes I carried in my own reflection. I whispered, "Did you see this coming, Mom?" My voice cracked at the end. I didn't cry, not yet, but I felt it. Something hollowing out in my chest, like someone had scooped out everything soft and left behind something hard and brittle. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept turning back memories like flipping pages in a book I didn't want to finish. Nadine was 5 when Dad brought her and Marjorie into our house. I was 15 and numb from losing Mom barely a year before. Nadine used to crawl into my bed and beg for bedtime stories. I'd hold her until she fell asleep with her thumb still in her mouth. I bought her birthday presents with my babysitting money. I taught her how to braid her own hair. When she fell off her bike, it was me who sat on the curb and cleaned her scraped knees, while Dad looked for the nearest pharmacy. I remembered the way she used to whisper, "Sissy," and hug my waist like I was her whole world. And now, I was not family. I reached into the drawer beside my bed and pulled out an old notebook, the one Mom used to write recipes in. It still smelled faintly like vanilla and cinnamon. Inside the front cover, she had written in cursive, "The family you build matters more than the one you're born into." Back then, I thought she meant the future. A husband, kids, a home of my own. Now, I wondered if she meant survival. Emotional survival. I closed the book and turned off the lamp. In the dark, I stared at the ceiling. Am I really that easy to erase? Maybe I was. Or maybe they were just too comfortable thinking I'd never say otherwise. The morning after Nadine's message, I didn't move for a long time. My phone lay face down on the kitchen counter, still vibrating occasionally from work notifications I wasn't ready to face. I wasn't sad, at least not in the way people expect. It was something else. Something that felt like acid under the skin, not enough to scream, just enough to make everything feel wrong. I went through the motions that week: shower, work, coffee, reply to emails, pretend to listen during design consultations, smile when the client asked, "Do you have siblings?" and feel that tiny sting behind the ribs as I said, "Yes, a half-sister." I didn't tell them we hadn't spoken properly in years. On Friday night, I was cleaning up dishes after a sad excuse for dinner when my phone rang. Not a text, not an email, a real call. The screen lit up with one name: Dad. I hesitated. Clive and I didn't talk much. Not since he married Marjorie. Not since I stopped pretending I was okay being a background character in their family highlight reel. I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered. "Hi." He cleared his throat. "Hey, Izzy. How are you, sweetheart?" Sweetheart. That word hadn't passed his lips in a decade. I leaned against the counter. "I'm fine." There was a long pause, a clink of ceramic, maybe his coffee mug. "Listen, I wanted to ask you something. It's not about you and Nadine. I know there's tension, but this is bigger than that. It's about family." "Here we go." "What is it?" I asked. "Well," he exhaled, "Marjorie's been organizing everything for the wedding, and you know how expensive venues are these days. The florist needs a deposit. Nadine's dress, it's custom. And with your career doing so well, we thought maybe, if you could help out a little." I blinked, stunned, silent. "You're asking me to pay for a wedding I wasn't even invited to?" "It's not like that," he said quickly. "You're still family, Izzy. This is just one of those times family steps up." The laugh that came out of me was bitter, dry. "You mean like how you stepped up for me when Mom died? Or when you decided I didn't belong in your new family unit?" "Don't twist this," he said sharply. "It's about support, not revenge." My hand clenched tighter around the phone. "So I'm good enough to bankroll your daughter's big day, but not good enough to sit in the audience?" "She's emotional. You know how brides are." "Right. Emotional. Like that explained anything." "I'm going to stop you right there," I said, voice low. "If this is the kind of family I'm supposed to support, I think I'll pass." Before he could respond, I hung up. I stood in the silence of my apartment, still holding the phone. The rage didn't hit all at once. It slid in slow, deliberate, like ink bleeding into fabric. I put the phone down gently, afraid I'd throw it. Then it buzzed, a notification from Aaron with a caption, "Girl, check this out." Attached was a screenshot of a group chat. The title bar read, "Voss Wedding Core Inside," a series of messages. Marjorie. "We still need someone to cover the flower deposit. Ask Isolde. Don't bring up the invite thing, it'll just make it messy." Clive. "She'll probably say yes if we spin it like helping Nadine." Nadine. "Whatever. Just tell her it's about family. She'll bite." I didn't realize I was holding my breath until my lungs burned. I read the messages twice, 3 times. Not one person said my name with affection. Not one message acknowledged that I might feel something. I wasn't a sister. I wasn't a daughter. I was a transaction. That was the word that echoed in my skull as I stood by the window. Transaction. Later that night, I pulled my journal from the nightstand drawer. the one Mom gave me for my 16th birthday. Most of the pages were blank, except for a few scribbled entries when I thought writing might save me from losing my mind. I opened to a fresh page and wrote, "They want me for what I can give, not for who I am. I miss you, Mom. They don't even pretend anymore." I paused, pen hovering above the paper. "I think you knew this would happen. You always knew who they were. You just didn't want to say it out loud." I sat there with the pen still in hand long after I stopped writing. The room was dark now, the only light a soft glow from the street lamp outside. I didn't cry. Again. It wasn't about tears anymore. I felt removed, like I'd finally stepped outside the burning house and realized I never had to walk back in. But the cruelest thing wasn't what they asked. It was how normal they made it sound. It had been nearly 2 weeks since the last call, since I heard my father try to spin guilt into a favor and frame absence as love. The silence that followed was, strangely, easier than I expected. They didn't reach out again. No one did, not even Nadine. So I filled my time with client work, project proposals, coffee runs, and pretending I still wanted to engage with a world that didn't know the version of me that was unraveling under the surface. But the silence didn't last. Late one Friday afternoon, just after wrapping up a consultation with a couple remodeling their kitchen, I got a text from Aaron. "You're gonna want to see this." Attached was a live stream link from a mutual acquaintance, someone I hadn't seen or heard from since college. My thumb hovered over the link for a moment before I gave in. The video loaded with background chatter and elegant floral arrangements surrounding an outdoor patio strung with fairy lights. I saw tables dressed in soft pastels and a small group gathering by a makeshift dance floor. Someone in a tuxedo stepped forward, holding out his hand. It was my father. Then I saw her. Nadine in a white lace gown, smiling like every camera in the world was trained on her. She reached for his hand, and they stepped into position under the string lights. The music started, and my heart stopped. Moon River. That song didn't belong to her. It wasn't some wedding cliché or a romantic oldie picked off a playlist. It was ours. Mine and Mom's. The lullaby she'd hum every single night, even when she was too tired to finish a verse. It was the sound of warmth when the world was cruel, the melody that lived in the walls of my childhood bedroom long after she passed. I hadn't heard it in 15 years. I couldn't bring myself to, not once, until now. And here it was, floating out of speakers at a wedding I wasn't welcome at, the soundtrack to a moment I should have never seen. I didn't realize I had sat down, collapsed, onto the floor until my knee hit the edge of the coffee table. The live stream continued. Nadine spun slowly, leaning into our father like she had known that song all her life, like it had been hers. But it wasn't. I ended the stream and stared at the dark screen, my reflection twisted in the glossy surface. My stomach churned, cold and tight, as something dawned on me, something that felt like a slap across memory itself. I got up, walked over to my bookshelf, and pulled out the old binder that held scanned copies of Mom's things, recipes, poems, pages from her journals. I had kept them digital, knowing the originals were packed away somewhere I didn't have access to, somewhere Marjorie had claimed as her territory years ago. Flipping through the PDF printouts, I reached the final page. The last entry, Mom's handwriting soft and cursive but fading slightly. "If Nadine ever asks about this song, tell her it's not hers. This was our lullaby." A coldness settled into my spine. I hadn't read that note in so long, but now it pulsed like a siren in my chest. How did Nadine even know that song meant something? How did she know to pick that song for that dance? There was only one answer. Marjorie. She had the originals. She had access to Mom's personal journals. She must have given the song to Nadine. Or worse, planted the idea, knowing what it would do to me if I ever found out. This wasn't coincidence. It wasn't some innocent mistake. It was deliberate, surgical. They didn't just cut me out of their lives. They reached into mine and pulled out a piece that still had Mom's fingerprints on it and twisted it into a stage prop. I sat still for a long time. No tears came. There was no room for them. I felt stripped of something I hadn't even realized I was still clinging to. This wasn't about invitations anymore. This wasn't about brunches or bridal showers or polite exclusions. This was memory theft, emotional vandalism. I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. This was the last line. You just crossed it. I stood up slowly, walked into the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were steady, too steady. I brought my laptop to the table, opened a new document, and started typing. Not an email, not a rant, just a list. A list of every time they blurred the boundary between family and fraud. Every manipulation, every dig disguised as care, every omission framed as keeping the peace. For the first time in years, I started writing down what I'd do if they ever pushed again. The next morning, my list still sat open on the laptop screen, the cursor blinking patiently at the end of the last line. I hadn't added anything new since midnight, but I couldn't bring myself to close it either. Somehow, just having it there, a living document of every invisible bruise, felt like armor. Then my inbox pinged. The subject line read, "Regarding your possible presence." It was from Marjorie. Not "Dear Isolde" or "We'd love to have you there." Just those 4 words, clinical and cold. I clicked. "If you do insist on attending, please coordinate your outfit accordingly. We suggest beige, champagne, or dusty blue. It's Nadine's day, and she's asked that there be no visual distractions. Thank you." No invitation. No RSVP link. Just wardrobe instructions. As if I were a background extra in a production I never auditioned for. I actually laughed. Loud, sharp, empty. Not out of humor, but because the absurdity of it all had finally tipped over into something surreal. They hadn't asked if I was coming. They hadn't said I was welcome. But if I did show up, I was to wear something that made sure I faded into the wallpaper. Later that evening, I called Dad. His voice picked up after 3 rings. "Isolde? I got an email from Marjorie." A pause. "Ah, right. Well, she wanted to give you a heads up, just in case you were thinking of coming." "Just in case," I repeated flatly. "Okay, so where would I be seated then?" He cleared his throat. "It's a tight arrangement this year. The family section's already full, but we could get you a nice spot near the back. Still good view of the stage and not near family, though." "Well," he trailed off. "Nadine was really particular about the seating. You know how brides are." There it was again, that infuriating phrase, as if emotional manipulation became acceptable the moment you strapped on a veil. "I see," I said. "So let me get this straight. I'm not invited, but I'm allowed to show up as long as I wear the right color, sit far enough away, and don't ruin the aesthetic?" "It's not about that. It's about avoiding drama. We want to keep things peaceful." Peaceful. I could almost feel the irony dripping through the speaker. "I'm sure you do," I said, and hung up. I didn't feel peace. I felt fire building behind my ribs. 2 days later, Erin forwarded me a message she'd gotten from one of her old styling contacts. Someone hired for Nadine's wedding. A forwarded screenshot. I braced myself. "For Isolde's look, please avoid white, red, or anything with embellishment. Nothing that might outshine the bride. She should look appropriately reserved. Understated?" Understated. That was the word they used. I wasn't even on the guest list, yet they had already assigned me a visual perimeter. Be neutral, be quiet, be invisible. I replied to Erin, not even invited, but still expected to look invisible. She texted back, "This is next level unhinged." Later that night, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, holding a dress I hadn't worn in years. It was deep burgundy, the color of old wine and unsaid things. Mom had worn it to her last wedding anniversary dinner with Dad. After she passed, I kept it wrapped in tissue paper, tucked away in a box like it might vanish if exposed to air too long. I slipped it on. It fit a little tighter around the waist. The shoulders sat sharper than I remembered, but it made me feel something I hadn't in months, rooted. I studied myself in the reflection, brushing a hand over the velvet curve of the dress. "If they wanted quiet," I said aloud, "they should have treated me like I mattered." And just like that, the countdown began, not to their wedding, but to my reckoning. A week passed. I didn't reply to Marjorie's dress code suggestion, and I hadn't spoken to Clive since that shallow conversation about seating. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd take the hint and leave me alone. They didn't. The message came on a Tuesday morning, sandwiched between work emails and a reminder about my dental appointment. It was from Nadine. Hey, we're still short on funds for the honeymoon. Can you help? No greeting, no explanation, no acknowledgement of the ghost she made me into. I stared at the screen, mouth slightly open, as if the words might shift into something rational if I just gave them time. But they didn't. They stayed as they were, clean, transactional, dismissive. I typed, then paused, deleted, then finally wrote, "Depends. Am I still not invited?" The typing bubbles appeared instantly. This isn't about that. It's about family helping family. That word again. Family. I didn't answer. By mid-afternoon, she sent a Google spreadsheet labeled honeymoon budget. Line items included 5-star resort in the Maldives, spa package, private villa, business class tickets, luxury cruise extension, estimated cost, north of $14,000. No thank you. No, this means the world to us. Just a polished list of entitlement. I scrolled through the spreadsheet, deadpan. A part of me wondered if she'd even considered how absurd it looked, asking the sister she publicly disowned to finance her tropical escape. I typed again. So, I'm good enough to fund your future, but not worthy of being part of your present? Her response came back almost immediately, like she'd been rehearsing it. It's not personal, Isolde. It's about what feels right. You and I, we're just different people now, but this is still family stuff. I reread that line 3 times. Not personal. The irony was bitter enough to taste. That night, I curled up on the couch with a glass of wine, trying to pretend my blood hadn't just turned colder. Erin texted me around 10, her message filled with nothing but a shocked emoji and a link to an Instagram story. I clicked. It was Nadine. Mid-conversation at what looked like a backyard wine night with her friends. Music playing low in the background. She held a drink, laughing. No, seriously, she has no kids, no husband, no real life. Her money's like the only thing she's got. I figured she might as well use it for something fun. The girls around her laughed. One of them even added, "Better than letting it sit in a bank, right?" And then they clinked glasses like it was some kind of joke only privileged hearts could understand. I sat still. Not angry, not surprised. Just hollow. I didn't replay the video. I didn't show Erin my reaction. I just closed the app and stared at the ceiling. There are moments where grief stops being dramatic, stops being about sobbing or yelling or pacing in circles, and instead becomes this low, constant buzz under your skin, like you're mourning someone who died and is still walking around. That's what it felt like with Nadine. I wasn't losing her now. I had already lost her, and maybe she was never mine to begin with. The next morning I sent one final message. The answer is no. You said I'm not family, remember? And then, for the first time, I blocked her number. It felt anticlimactic at first, just a silent click, and she was gone from my inbox. But something shifted after that. It was the first time I'd ever drawn a real line, not hinted, not retreated quietly, not swallowed my pride for the sake of peace. A full, unapologetic, deliberate no. For once I wasn't trying to make things better. I was protecting what was left of me. But drawing lines in the sand only works until someone dares to cross it. The morning after I blocked Nadine, I made a single phone call. It was to the event coordinator I had originally spoken to months ago, when Clive and Marjorie casually mentioned they were short on funds, and I, like a fool, offered to help. The woman answered on the second ring. "This is Lindsay, with Magnolia Events." "This is Isolde Rayner," I said, calm and level. "I need to withdraw payment under Contract Clause 5B. There was a brief silence on the line, then a rustle of paper. "You're the primary payer for the Voss wedding, correct?" "That's right." "Which portion are you looking to cancel?" "All of it," I replied. "The venue deposit, the catering, the cake, the floral arrangements. Everything covered under my payment authorization." She hesitated. "We're 6 days from the event. I'll need a written confirmation. You'll have it by noon." And she did. I drafted the email with the same clarity I used when designing project proposals. Concise, professional, irrevocable. By noon, all funds were frozen. A single sentence at the bottom of the email sealed it. "Please note this decision is final and non-negotiable." I didn't wait for a response. I simply closed my laptop, made myself a sandwich, and went back to work. Saturday morning. The wedding was supposed to start at noon. The weather was perfect, blue skies, soft breeze, the kind of day photographers pray for. But the venue was chaos. Aaron sent me a voice memo from across town. "Girl, you will not believe what's happening right now. No food showed up, the cake never came. They were scrambling to find folding tables and Costco sandwiches an hour before guests arrived." I sipped my coffee and said nothing. She added, "Marjorie is losing it, screaming at the staff like they stole her purse. Nadine's crying in the bridal suite, and Clive keeps calling you. He's called me twice already." I didn't respond. An hour later, Erin forwarded me a screenshot of a group chat that included one of her cousins, someone who worked at the venue. Nadine slapped her mom, screamed something about sabotage, then threw a champagne flute at the wall. Below it, a second message. "She's threatening to sue her own sister, loudly." I turned off notifications and went back to sketching out a shelving concept for a client's home office. The irony wasn't lost on me. While they scrambled to salvage a wedding built on entitlement, I was building something functional for someone who'd actually asked for help. Later that evening, I walked into the local cafe for my usual chai latte. It was quiet, just a couple of tables filled, and I recognized the barista, Jamie. She smiled at me. But just as I was about to place my order, a woman I didn't know turned from the sugar counter and raised an eyebrow. "You're the one who ruined your sister's wedding, right?" she asked, as casually as if she were commenting on the weather. I blinked. "Excuse me?" "She said you pulled the plug on everything, just because she didn't give you a front row seat. That's dramatic." I tilted my head, offering a tight smile. "You mean the sister who told me I wasn't family? That sister?" Her mouth opened, then closed. She didn't respond. I took my chai and walked out without another word. The stories spread like wildfire. Marjorie had already spun her version to the neighbors and the church ladies. Isolde, the bitter spinster, lashing out because she wasn't center stage. I knew how they'd frame it. Jealous, emotional, unstable. It was easier than admitting they'd built their castle on borrowed bricks, and I'd simply taken mine back. I didn't defend myself. Not online, not in person. I didn't call Clive. I didn't reply to the voicemail from Aunt Lydia. I didn't even read the email from Nadine's college roommate asking me to think of the bigger picture. No more explaining, no more context. I was done being everyone's footnote. That Sunday, I took a long walk down Monument Avenue. It was quiet, golden with spring light. I passed families taking graduation photos, runners pacing themselves for the 10K, and a little girl in a white dress chasing a bubble wand. For the first time in weeks, I felt unburdened. I didn't feel regret. I didn't feel shame. I felt power, not the kind that screams to be heard, the kind that simply knows. I'd spent my entire adult life trying to make room for people who would never make room for me. That part of the story was over, but predators don't stay quiet when prey learns to bite back. 2 days after the wedding imploded, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing. Not texts this time. A call. My father's name glowed across the screen like a bad omen. I stared at it for a moment before I picked up. No, good morning. No, are you okay? Just his voice, dry, measured, and already defensive. "You've humiliated us, Isolde." I blinked at the ceiling, still in bed. "Excuse me? You could have said no in a better way. You didn't have to sabotage everything." I sat up slowly. "You mean by pulling back money I was never thanked for in the first place?" His tone didn't soften. "It's not just about money. It's about what it symbolized. And now, look what you've done." "Look what I've done?" I repeated. There was a pause, like he expected me to apologize. "Maybe," he continued, "you can help make it right by covering Nadine's college tuition. I know it's a lot to ask, but it's the least you could do." I nearly laughed, but it came out like a dry breath. "Least for who?" He cleared his throat. "We're still a family, Isolde. At the end of the day, blood matters." "Except mine," I said, and hung up. That afternoon, Aaron sent me a link with no caption. Just a link. I tapped it. It led to a GoFundMe page titled, "Help Nadine Recover from Her Ruined Wedding, A Sister's Betrayal." At the top was a photo of Nadine, eyes red, face tilted toward her bouquet like a Greek tragedy mask. The description below made my stomach knot. Nadine has always been a kind, generous soul. Her wedding was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, until her older sister Isolde pulled financial support out of jealousy and left the family in ruins. Isolde was like a second mother to her growing up, but sometimes jealousy destroys love. I stared at the screen. No, this wasn't real. And yet, there it was, a public crucifixion in pastel fonts. I scrolled further. A list of donations, names I recognized from childhood, neighbors, relatives, co-workers of Marjorie's. Below the donation tally, comments. So sorry this happened to you, Nadine. Isolde used to be sweet. What changed? Tragic family betrayal. I sat still for several minutes. Then the notification buzzed again. A screenshot from Aaron. A Facebook post shared by Aunt Lillian. Some wounds cut deepest when they come from within the family. Please support Nadine. I closed the phone. That night, I stood in front of the mirror. I didn't cry. I just looked at myself, looked through myself. Mom once told me, you don't have to be in pain to prove you belong. I'd spent years mistaking pain for loyalty. I opened my laptop, stared at a blank email draft. For a second, I typed, you have no idea what you're enabling. Then I deleted it. Instead, I opened a new email, and one by one, I typed out short, direct messages to each person who had shared that GoFundMe post. To Aunt Lillian, to Uncle Brent, to Rhonda from across the street, each message read the same. You know me better than that, or maybe you never did. I didn't wait for replies. The next morning, I walked to the corner bookstore and bought myself a new notebook, hardcover, linen blue, clean slate. When the cashier handed me my change, she smiled and said, this one's sturdy. Good for beginnings. I nodded. That's the point. At home, I made tea and sat by the window. Outside, life went on, dogs pulling leashes, teens filming TikToks, an older couple arguing about where they parked. And I sat with my new notebook. No rage, no revenge, just a line in ink. I do not need to prove what they refused to see. I wasn't at war anymore. I was just not participating, and that felt louder than anything I could have said. But silence wasn't surrender. It was a storm gathering in still air. The air had turned, but it wasn't spring anymore. It was something sharper, thinner. A week after the GoFundMe post, just when the noise seemed to fade, it returned in a different form. Nadine uploaded a carousel of wedding photos to her Instagram. The first image, her in the white dress, beaming beside Clive. The second, a wide-angle shot of the reception with soft lighting, floral arches, and champagne flutes raised in frozen toasts. The last, a black-and-white shot of her twirling mid-dance, hair loose, eyes closed like she was the only person in the world who had ever felt joy. The caption read, surrounded by love, only true family made it, no drama, just bloodline. Subtle? Maybe to strangers. To me, it was a blade under velvet. My phone pinged twice. First from Aaron. Did you see her latest post? I think this was for you. Second, a screenshot from my coworker Jenna. Was that shade? Or am I reading into it? I didn't answer either. I just saved the image. And I sat there for a long time, staring at the final photo, at the way Nadine's head tilted back in perfect elation, as if I had never existed. Later that night, after dinner and dishes and 30 quiet minutes watching a nature documentary with the volume low, my phone buzzed again. An unknown number. No name. The message was short. You still don't get it. You were never one of us. Keep your money. Keep your pity. No punctuation. No emotion. Just poison pretending to be truth. I stared at the words while sitting cross-legged on my living room floor. The only light came from the floor lamp beside the couch, casting long shadows across the rug. In one hand, I held my phone. In the other, a framed photo of Mom, her smile permanent. The corners of her mouth turned like she knew something the rest of us hadn't caught up to yet. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the phone. I laughed, a short, cold laugh that surprised even me. It wasn't bitterness. It wasn't rage. It was the sound of someone finally done playing a rigged game. I stood up, walked to my desk, and opened the folder labeled College Fund. It had been sitting there for months. Inside, scanned documents, bank approvals, draft transfers. Nadine's name on all of it. I selected the folder. Right-clicked. Delete. When prompted to confirm, I didn't blink. Then I opened my email and typed 3 lines to Clive. There will be no tuition from me. You called me family when it was convenient. You made me stranger when it wasn't. I didn't wait for his reply. I blocked his number. Then I blocked Marjorie. Then Nadine. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt intact. Like each step was a brick being set into place, building the wall that should have always existed between me and their version of family. The next morning, I woke early. I didn't check my phone. I didn't scroll. I packed a single suitcase, nothing excessive. Just what I needed to feel like myself somewhere else. I locked the apartment, dropped the key into the mailbox downstairs, and ordered a car to the airport. No final glance back. No dramatic music swelling in the background. Just silence. And in that silence, I felt more free than I had in years. At the gate, I bought a paperback and a bottle of water. The woman behind me in line complimented my scarf. I said thank you and smiled. I didn't mention where I was going. I didn't feel the need to explain why I was leaving. Closure isn't a place, it's a decision. And I had made mine. No more proving. No more begging. No more contorting myself into someone who fit their mold of family. The flight attendant called my boarding group. I rose, gripped the handle of my suitcase, and stepped forward. The sky beyond the windows looked overcast, soft and heavy like a held breath. I exhaled. Maybe the wound wouldn't ever fully close. Maybe there would always be a mark where it used to burn. But I wouldn't keep scratching it open just to feel something. That was the difference now. I didn't need the pain to remind me who I was. I already knew. But even freedom comes with a shadow. And sometimes it still speaks in your mother's voice. 1 month later. The rain in Portland had a different rhythm. Less dramatic than Virginia storms, but steadier. Like it knew it had nothing left to prove. I'd been here 3 weeks. A quiet sublet near Alberta Street. The kind of place where people left handwritten signs on their fences that read, "Please take one," over baskets of lemons, used books, or thrifted mugs. I took a ceramics class on Thursdays. Nothing fancy, just clay under my fingernails and a wheel that spun until my thoughts caught up to my hands. Sometimes my pieces collapsed, the walls too thin. Other times they held. I liked that I didn't need everything to stand up perfectly. I started waking early, making coffee before the sun rose. There were no unread messages waiting, no phantom vibrations, no dread when my screen lit up, just a life, uncomplicated and my own. I hung a small piece of fired clay on the front door last weekend. I'd carved 2 words into it with a kitchen knife. I'm enough. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a declaration. It felt like a fact. Erin called me from back home a few days later. She never asked how I was, she just jumped right in. "You're not going to believe this," she said, "but Nadine's asking Clive and Marjorie to sell their Lexus." I blinked. What for? She burned through the rest of the wedding cash, wants to go back to grad school, says the family owes her one. I leaned against the kitchen counter, pressing the cold ceramic mug to my chest. And? They said no, Erin replied with a short laugh. Marjorie told her, "We gave you a wedding, not a lifetime subscription." Nadine lost it, called them selfish, ungrateful, accused Clive of emotionally abandoning her. I didn't say anything. "There's more," she continued. "Someone flagged their GoFundMe, the post's down. Apparently a few neighbors finally spoke up, said it felt shady, like manipulation." I walked to the window, watching a bus pull up at the corner. A teenager climbed off with a giant cello case, struggling to keep it upright. A man in a puffer vest helped her without a word. "The house is quiet now," Erin said softly. "No more strategy meetings, no more group chats, just silence. Clive hasn't mentioned your name in a week." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. It felt like a curtain had closed, not in triumph, but in quiet resignation. I thanked her and hung up. On Saturday, I flew back for 1 day, not to visit anyone. I brought a small envelope in my carry-on. Inside was a printed copy of a scholarship form, the same form I'd once filled out with Nadine's name, the one I never submitted. I took a cab from the airport straight to the cemetery. Mom's grave sat between 2 birch trees. Someone had placed a sunflower bouquet there recently. Not from me, maybe some neighbor, maybe no one at all. I crouched down and laid the envelope beneath the vase. Then I took out a sprig of dried lavender I'd kept in my bag and rested it across the stone. I didn't fix them, I whispered, but I didn't become them either. And somehow, that felt like the answer she would have wanted. I didn't stay long. Back in Portland that evening, I walked to the corner cafe for tea. The barista recognized me now, always called me Early Bird. The seat by the window was empty, the light warm against the wood-grain table. I pulled out my notebook and flipped past the old pages. Some filled with lists, others just fragments. I didn't need to write today, I just sat. The stillness didn't feel hollow anymore. The next morning, an email popped into my inbox. A local high school invited me to speak at a community session about resilience and selfhood in complex families. I read the message twice, then once more, and then I smiled. Yes, I thought, that I can talk about. Not to point fingers, not to drag names through the dirt, but because maybe somewhere there was a kid sitting in their room wondering if love was something they had to earn. And maybe I could tell them, you are already enough. You are already whole. You don't have to bleed to be seen. Healing isn't about forgetting. It's about knowing who you are after everything tries to tell you you're not enough. Looking back now, I don't regret walking away. I used to think love had to look a certain way. Shared blood, last names, matching smiles at dinner tables. But family is who shows up when you're broken, not who breaks you and calls it discipline. I learned the hard way that sometimes peace doesn't come from making things right. It comes from choosing yourself when no one else will. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own home, let me tell you this. You are not the problem. You are not too much. You are not a burden. You are someone who survived a version of love that tried to make you small. And now, it's your turn to build the version of family that sees you fully and stays. So, what about you? Have you ever had to walk away from people who claim to love you, just to finally breathe? Do you believe family is earned through action, not just blood? Let me know in the comments. If this story spoke to something in you, type 1 or tell me where you're watching from. And hey, if it didn't hit home, tell me why. I want to understand your side too. This space is for all of us. And if you want to hear more stories like this, raw, real, and from the heart, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. That way, you'll never miss what's coming next. Because the truth is, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just finally say, I deserve better. Thanks for watching. I see you, I hear you, and I hope you never forget, you're not alone.
At my company's anniversary party, I unexpectedly ran into my classmate, Sarah. But Sarah just mocked me for being a factory worker. Don't come near us if you see us, okay? My husband is a Harvard-educated director, way above someone lowly and incompetent like you, her words seemingly enjoying the harassment. It brought back painful memories of middle school. Back then, Sarah used to bully me for being poor. Finally, I felt as if the last straw of my patience had snapped inside me. Well, your husband will be unemployed from tomorrow, I said. Sarah was shocked by my unexpected words, but soon laughed it off as a joke. However, she and her husband would soon understand the true meaning of my words. My name is David Young. I'm turning 42 this year. I met my wife Annie at work, and we got married. It's our 15th wedding anniversary this year, and I've never really had a serious argument with a kind and family-oriented Annie. I'm always grateful to Annie, who always supports me, and we live a peaceful life together. One day, my company decided to hold an anniversary party. It's the 50th anniversary this year, so it was going to be a big event, and I was looking forward to it. On the day of the anniversary, I wore a suit and tie picked out by Annie and got ready to leave. Annie had her hair done beautifully in the morning and was wearing a light-coloured dress. How do I look, David? You look incredibly beautiful, I replied. Her elegant beauty was mesmerising. Perhaps partly due to my bias, with Annie by my side, I headed to the venue. The venue we rented was quite large, and as we got closer, we saw more people heading to the same place. It's typical for a big corporation's anniversary party to have so many invitees, I remarked. While exchanging words with Annie, we entered the venue and waited for the event to start. Inside, many people had already gathered, exchanging greetings and introducing themselves. Company events are, in a way, a chance for self-promotion, so the more capable employees are eager to network. While I was greeting attendees, I was suddenly approached. "Is that you, David?" It was Sarah, right there in front of me. Sarah, the beauty and centre of attention in our class since childhood, still maintained her beauty even after about 30 years since middle school. But now her beauty faded as she glared at me with her eyes narrowed. "It's been a while, hasn't it, David? What are you doing now? Everyone's worried about you since you never show up to reunions." Sarah spoke to me with a mocking tone. To be frank, back in middle school, I wasn't exactly a standout in my class. Sarah, seemingly oblivious to this, kept talking with a hype-his cheerful laugh. "Even though I hadn't asked, I got married 5 years ago. My husband is an elite employee who was in charge of an overseas branch until recently, and today he's even getting recognized as an outstanding employee." "That's great, congratulations," I said, surprised that Sarah's husband worked at this company. I still offered my congratulations. Then Sarah, for some reason displeased, frowned. "There's no need for you to congratulate me. What kind of job do you have being here? Are you associated with the company?" Before I could explain, Sarah waved her hand dismissively, as if bored with the conversation. "Never mind, it's not important. You probably work in some subcontractor's factory, being a middle school graduate and all." "I do go to the factory." I started to speak again, but by that time, Sarah had already turned her back on me. "A factory worker like you should even be here." "Just stay quiet in the corner and don't embarrass yourself." Sarah walked away towards a man that must be her husband, Brandon. While I thought it was petty, I made sure to remember his name. Sarah mocked me for being a middle school graduate, but to be precise, that's not entirely true. When I was in middle school, my mom got seriously ill, and my dad lost his job due to the recession. From that day, my life changed completely. My dad, once a diligent employee, started drinking and gambling to escape from the harsh reality. Soon, we ran out of money and had to sell our house, moving into a small, old one-bedroom apartment. As a middle schooler, I grew taller, but couldn't afford new uniforms or sportswear, so I had to make do with hand-me-downs from relatives. This made me a target for ridicule. My classmates called me poor and uncool. Sarah, beautiful and bossy, was the ringleader, even instructing the entire class not to talk to me. She was the popular girl in class, and no one dared to go against her, so her bullying continued until we graduated. On graduation day, Sarah called me over and asked with a sneer, "Which high school are you going to?" "It would be good if you could get a hand-me-down uniform." I was so annoyed by her persistent teasing that I retorted, "I won't need a uniform for the high school I'm going to." "Not going to high school, just working after middle school." "Yeah, that's right. I'm going to work after graduating middle school." Hearing my response, Sarah burst into laughter. "Can't believe you don't even have the money to go to high school. Well, do your best to earn you put, a middle school graduate." I left without replying to her. What I told Sarah wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't completely false either. I attended a night high school while working during the day. My dad was still drowning in alcohol, and my mom, who was doing piecework, kept going in and out of the hospital. So I had no one to rely on. After graduating middle school, I desperately looked for a job, but there were hardly any companies willing to hire a middle school graduate. The only place that hired me was the machine manufacturing factory where I work now. I've always loved tinkering with machines, so I threw myself into this job. I worked during the day and attended high school at night. Balancing work and study was tough, but I managed, Thanks to the encouragement from my older colleagues, they taught me the ropes at work and even treated me to lunch sometimes, treating me like their own son. Years went by as I worked, supported by everyone. After finally graduating high school, I planned to continue working at the factory as an employee, but my senior colleagues advised me otherwise. Now that you've graduated high school, try to study as much as you can, they suggested. I went to college. I chose a university department related to my company's business and gained strength by acquiring various certifications and researching specialized fields. After graduating from college, I returned to the company. A few years later, at 25, I encountered a turning point at work. I met Annie, who'd become my wife. Annie was kind to everyone and had a lovely smile, and I gradually developed a fondness for her. But it turned out that she was also interested in me. She asked me out on a date, and that's how our relationship began. A few years later, we happily got married and built a warm family together. Throughout such a life full of ups and downs, I had completely forgotten about being harassed in middle school. So, when Sarah approached me at the venue today, I was genuinely surprised. Seeing my distressed look, Annie looked at me worriedly. After I briefly explained the situation, she tightly grasped my hand. No matter what anyone says, I know you're a wonderful person, David. Let's stay confident and enjoy the company's anniversary party. Yeah, you're right. Encouraged by her supportive words, I squeezed her hand back. Thus, we decided to wait for the party to start. After exchanging greetings with everyone, the hustle and bustle finally settled down. Thinking of resting until the start time, I moved towards the wall with Annie. Oh, you're still here. There were Sarah and her husband, whom I had just parted ways with. I was a bit surprised to bump into them so unexpectedly, but I sincerely congratulated her husband, Brandon. Brandon, I heard you're an outstanding employee getting an award today. Congratulations. But instead of responding, Brandon just looked me over as if appraising me. Is this the factory worker classmate you were talking about, Jay? He has the audacity to attend the company's anniversary party, despite being a mere worker. Sarah returned the words with a bitter expression. Then Brandon, ignoring my presence, curiously asked Sarah, but for a factory worker, he's wearing a nice suit. I'm an elite, so I'm quite particular about suits. Even if he tries hard to wear a good suit, it's ruined because he's a lowly worker. It's truly embarrassing to have someone like him as a classmate. Frowning, Sarah spat out her words, and Brandon inquired further, embarrassing, Jay, imagine he's been a factory worker since dropping out of middle school. That's 30 years of being a mere worker. Well, wow, really. That's unbelievable. Sarah pointed and laughed at me, and Brandon leaned back, distancing himself as if amused. They both looked down on me with obvious disdain and then glanced at the person next to me. There stood Annie, watching the two of them intently. So, this bottom-of-the-barrel worker, even though he's a dropout, managed to get married. What does your wife do? Sarah asked me, and I answered honestly, she works in the same field as me. We met at work. At that moment, Sarah and Brandon looked at each other and burst out laughing. A couple both sweating it out in the field, doing menial work. Perfect match for an incompetent dropout like you. They started mocking not just me, but also my wife. I couldn't understand how they could say such awful things to my wife, a stranger to them. As I stood there stunned, Sarah blurted out, "But if I were you, I'd be too miserable to even mention working in a factory." Yeah, for an elite like me, it's unimaginable to live such a lowly life. Please stop talking like that, I retorted angrily to their cruel insults. But Sarah looked at me as if I were something dirty and turned her back, and Brandon shooed me away as if swatting a fly. If we keep talking to you, people might think I'm a local class worker like you. Could you go somewhere else, Jay? Talking to someone lowly like you might rub off on me. I was boiling with anger at such rude behaviour. But as a grown-up, I couldn't just let my emotions take over and start yelling. So I tried hard to hold it in. However, Sarah seemed to mock my feelings and hurled more disdainful words. "From now on, if you see us, don't come close, okay? My husband is a Harvard-educated director. Way different from a lowly incompetent person like you." Her words, enjoying the harassment, brought back painful middle school memories. Back then and even now, Sarah acted arrogantly, thinking she wouldn't be retaliated against. I felt like I heard the sound of my patience snapping inside. "Well, your husband will be unemployed from tomorrow." Sarah was taken aback by my unexpected words, staring with wide eyes. As I stared back expressionlessly, she laughed it off, pretending, "Ah, my husband unemployed. What are you talking about? Have you lost your mind? Why would a mere factory worker like you have any power over my husband? That's because I'm the president of the company." For a moment, Sarah was dumbfounded, then suddenly burst into loud laughter. "You, the president? Don't be silly. Are you just saying that because my husband is a Harvard-educated director, and you want to one-up him? It's not a lie." Yeah, keep your fantasies to yourself, just like in middle school, I continued seriously, but Sarah clearly didn't believe a word. Then Brandon looked back and forth between me and Annie, standing by my side, and shrugged in disbelief. Married to a husband who spouts such fantasies, she must be quite the wife. Aren't you embarrassed to stand beside such a man? After spitting out those words, Brandon and Sarah hardly left together. As I watched their backs, I trembled with anger. The person who had harassed me so much in middle school was still treating me this way even now as an adult. And it wasn't just me they were mocking, it was Annie, my wife. I couldn't stay silent any longer. As I was about to step forward in anger to call them back, a gentle hand was placed on my shoulder. It was Annie. "I heard everything, but it's not good to reprimand them here." But I couldn't just back down, especially after they laughed at Annie. But as I looked at her, I was taken aback by her unexpected expression. She wore a mischievous smile. I have a good idea, hearing Anne's plan. I nodded deeply, feeling a sense of relief. When the announcement for the party start was made, we moved to our assigned seats. The event began on time, and the employees started singing the company anthem. In my peripheral vision, I saw Sarah and Brandon singing along as well. After checking with the organisers, it turned out that Brandon was indeed being recognised as an outstanding employee. Along with several other distinguished employees, he was escorted to a special seat with his family. Imagining what was about to happen, I suppressed a rising chuckle. After the anthem, the entertainment part started. There were performances by a magician and comedians, summarising the company's history in a skit, filling the room with a festive atmosphere. As the entertainment ended, the host led the applause and continued with the ceremony. "Next, we'll have a speech from the president and CEO, Mr. Young," the host announced. Upon those words, I began to walk slowly. As I stood on the stage, I looked over the gathered crowd, expressing my gratitude while everyone listened intently. Only 2 people were the exception. Sarah and Brandon were staring at me, mouths agape in shock. Even from the stage, I could see their mouths moving. Why? Why is he speaking? It can't be true. He's the president. I haven't heard anything about this. Imagine that's what they were muttering. I continued speaking. Normally, we would now proceed to the ceremony for awarding outstanding employees. However, before that, I have an announcement to make. One of the awardees, the director who was assigned to our overseas branch, Brandon, will be dismissed from his position effective today. The room was enveloped in silence in an instant. As I tried to continue with a smile, the host approached me. What is your reasoning for this?" the host asked me, appearing confused. It was then that Sarah suddenly stood up and shouted, "That's a lie, everyone. This man was just a classmate from my middle school. He's just a mere factory worker. Why is he standing there? Yeah, this must be some kind of prank. And this taste in entertainment is terrible, right, everyone?" With her shrill voice, Sarah spat out these words, and next to her, Brandon grinned smugly, looking back and forth between me and Sarah, bursting into a brazen laugh. The guests in the room started murmuring, enveloped in a tense atmosphere. I continued speaking calmly. Sarah just mentioned earlier that working in a factory is a lowly job. She also told me not to talk to her anymore, fearing that the lowness would rub off on her. So what? Sarah glared back at me, hands on her hips, still refusing to admit wrongdoing. I work for this company. I cannot continue working with someone who is ashamed of our work, I stated. But my husband is an elite director, completely different from you. Sarah retorted. But at that moment, the executive director, Ethan, rushed to the awardee's seat, his face flushed with anger, and started yelling at Brandon. Hey, apologize to Mr. Yum right now. However, Sarah and Brandon, still half smiling, refused to believe Ethan's words. What's wrong, Ethan? Why should we apologize to some factory worker? He's just a lowly, incompetent worker. He's just trying to scare us by lying about firing my husband, Sarah said. But Ethan shouted back, his voice trembling, state the name of our company. Young High-Tech Corporation, Brandon muttered. Oh, muttering this, Brandon suddenly realized, and his face turned pale. His name, David Young. Could it be? He's really our company's president. At Brandon's words, Sarah froze in shock. During this time, I had been watching them, and judging that they finally understood, I spoke again. It seems you finally believe me, Brandon. His face ashen, Brandon was shaking all over, hardly able to stand from his chair. In fact, I continued, Annie is the daughter of a major manufacturer that produces some of the leading semiconductor devices in the country. The company that accepted me, a middle school grad, was one of her parents' factories. At that time, it was still a mid-sized company taking on various machinery productions, but 30 years ago, it developed its first proprietary product, a microcryptometer, and has since expanded its business with the advancement of electronic device technology. Now, alongside semiconductor manufacturing, we're collaborating with foreign companies to develop even more precise testing systems. Combining the knowledge I gained in college with a practical perspective, I actively participated in product development after graduating, resulting in several hit products. Thanks to this, I was transferred to the headquarters, promoted to Director of Electronic Hardware Development, and that's where I met Annie. Even after our marriage, Annie's family never spoke of my past, attending a night high school instead. They warmly accepted me as a diligent and enthusiastic young man, rare in this era. Wanting to repay this family and the company that raised me, I devoted myself to my work without distraction. Then, 2 years ago, when Annie's father retired, I took over as the president. Understanding the truth, Brandon looked like he was about to collapse, and Ethan addressed him even more desperately. You were overseas, so you might not have known directly, but at least check the information about the company you work for. That is, Brandon, his face still pale, tried to stammer an excuse, but Ethan, his face red with anger, kept yelling, You're so caught up in being an elite from Harvard University that you don't even know the face of our president. I'm ashamed that I recommended someone like you as an outstanding employee. Ethan then grabbed Brandon by the scruff of his neck and dragged him in front of me. I deeply apologized for the disrespectful behavior of my subordinate. Please forgive us. I'm so sorry for my ignorance, Ethan said, bowing his head forcefully. Brandon finally knelt down of his own accord, his face turning bright red as sweat dripped onto the floor. Annie, who had been watching this unfold, turned to me with a question. David, what will you do now? You've revealed the truth in front of everyone. To avoid being accused of unilaterally firing an employee, yeah, well, he's fired. Someone who insults a person they've just met like that definitely doesn't fit in with our company, I said. Upon hearing my words, Ethan seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, thinking the situation was resolved. But the next voice came from Sarah, who had been dumbfoundedly watching everything. Her face flushed with anger, she lashed out at me. "I don't care if you're the president or whatever. Why do you get to act so high and mighty?" Furious and almost panting, Sarah was met with my calm response. "Before you criticized others, maybe you should worry about your own life. With your husband fired, you'll lose your income and won't be able to live luxuriously anymore," I said. Sarah, upon hearing my words, finally seemed to grasp her situation. Standing frozen, her lips quivering, Annie glanced at her and whispered, "To me, David, let's have those people leave now." "You're right. It's a special anniversary party after all. We need to make sure everyone who came enjoys it," I said. I instructed the staff to escort Brandon, who was still kneeling, and Sarah, pale-faced and rigid, out of the venue. After they left, we refreshed the atmosphere of the venue and successfully concluded the party. Brandon repeatedly tried to apologize, but I dismissed them. Having an employee who looks down on others just because of Sarah's words could eventually lead to issues at work. Brandon, who had been fired, suffered greatly since he had already purchased a luxurious home and car on loan, relying on his salary. Sarah, who always loved a lavish lifestyle and apparently never saved much, found their finances in dire straits within months. Unable to pay the enormous loans, the couple eventually had to sell their house and car and move to a shabby apartment. Brandon struggled to find a new job, losing both money and status, leading to endless quarrels in their now impoverished household. Eventually, they divorced and now live separately. Brandon, desperate for a job, finally found work as a factory worker. He spends his days standing in front of a conveyor belt, endlessly assembling machines as part of a repetitive process. Meanwhile, Sarah became a topic of discussion among her local classmates for her actions toward me. Abandoned even by her family, she now lives alone, struggling to afford meals. Her once prized beauty faded away. She's barely making ends meet by working night jobs. As for Annie and me, we continue to live happily. Our focus on developing excellent employees led to stable and growing company performance. Just as the company helped me, I now aim to fulfill the hopes of the younger generation. We've enhanced our educational programs and training systems for our employees, which has already led to the creation of an innovative new product. But it's not just a new product that was born. Annie and I also welcomed a beautiful daughter. Annie's family is overjoyed and adores her. "I'm so glad I met you. I'm truly happy," I said. "Me too," Annie replied. "When I graduated from middle school, I thought my life was over. But by never giving up on my potential and tirelessly searching for a path, I've been helped by many and now lead such a happy life. I want to continue delivering products that make the world a better place as a way to give back. With this resolve in my heart, I smiled at my precious family." James, the CEO, wants to talk to you, and Michael is with him too. It seems you're finally being let go. I guess I'm just an unlucky guy. As I headed to the CEO's office through the elevator in the hallway, I was engulfed in gloom. When I entered the CEO's office, just as my subordinate had said, Mr. Smith and department head Michael were there. "You don't fit in our company, you're fired." Hearing this sudden dismissal from Mr. Smith, Michael sitting beside me raised the corners of his mouth, bursting into a smile of joy. "But then, are you perhaps misunderstanding something?" The true nature of this dismissal that he revealed next was shockingly unexpected. "I am James. This year I turned 37. Just an ordinary company employee, I now live in a corner of New York, originally from a rural area in Idaho. Maybe it's because I was nurtured in a generous and leisurely countryside environment, though it's a bit odd to say about myself. I've never been able to become as cool and detached as city folks. always siding with those in trouble or in a weaker position, a man of deep compassion. I went to school in Royal Idaho until high school and then attended a mid-tier private university in New York. During my college years, I worked various part-time jobs and eventually got a job at an ID company, which at the time was barely more than a startup. Before I knew it, 15 years had passed as I struggled and worked at this company. The company, which was small when I joined, has grown into a mid-sized ID trading company. As a mid-level manager and the head of the system development section at our New York headquarters, my work environment is far from ideal, to say the least. Being a head in name only, I'm constantly caught between the demands of my superiors and the needs of my subordinates, a classic example of being stuck between a rock and a hard place. Especially among my subordinates, many are from prestigious universities, making them generally difficult to handle. Among them, some subordinates have very high self-esteem and self-confidence, and they are very assertive. Therefore, as a mediocre supervisor with a significantly lower educational background than theirs, I often sense their defiance and mockery towards my instructions, even if they don't express it openly. In other words, they look down on me as their head. Moreover, my direct superior, the head of the system development section, Michael, is a typical opportunist who climbed the career ladder just by being savvy. Michael tends to delegate all important or complex tasks to his subordinates, leaving everything to others while he takes all the credit for himself. These troublesome subordinates and superiors are mostly from the prestigious private university Key University, forming an unbearable internal clique. Michael often says to me, "James, your alma mater university is like the typical fallback university for us Key University graduates, isn't it? It's sad you must be harbouring such a complex." Michael would say this out loud, ensuring I heard it, and then the subordinates from Key University would laugh mockingly at me, even though it wasn't funny at all. Indeed, my alma mater university is not highly ranked and is considered a safe school for students aiming for prestigious universities like Key University. I too had applied to prestigious universities, but ended up at university as my safety option. So, Michael's sarcastic comments often struck a chord with me. In this hostile office environment, my oasis was Elizabeth, who recently started working as a cleaner in our office. Elizabeth, not yet accustomed to her job, often made mistakes and seemed lost on the floor, which led to some mean-spirited younger employees clicking their tongues or harassing her openly. However, as I mentioned earlier, being raised in the countryside has instilled in me a nature that can't ignore those invulnerable positions. Gradually, I found myself discreetly helping Elizabeth when she seemed to be struggling with her cleaning tasks and started to strike up friendly conversations with her. Elizabeth wore a large cleaner's hat, pulled down over her eyes, and a big mask, making it hard to see her face, but she seemed to be quite elderly. She warmed up to me as I helped her out and started making small talk, sharing stories from her life that were both interesting and insightful. Indeed, the stories from Elizabeth, who has lived through many years and is a senior in life, were interesting and full of wisdom. In the midst of the hostile work environment that left me feeling on edge, the casual chats with Elizabeth gradually became an irreplaceable form of relaxation for me. However, my subordinates in the system development section, especially those in the Key University clique led by Michael, openly mocked us. Seeing me, with my lower education, happily chatting with the cleaner Elizabeth, they would say loudly enough for us to hear, "Low-educated old man and an old lady, perfect match at the bottom." On one such day, after working late at the office and feeling completely drained, I finally made it to the nearest station to my company. As I passed through the ticket gate and was descending the stairs to the platform, a wallet flew out of the bag of an elderly woman walking slightly ahead of me and fell to the ground. However, the elderly lady didn't notice and continued to hurry towards the platform. I immediately made my way through the crowd, picked up the fallen wallet, looked up, and frantically searched for her. To my relief, I found her already lined up at the boarding area of the platform. It was a platform for a train heading in the opposite direction to mine. I need to get this wallet back to that elderly lady quickly. In the midst of the rush hour crowd, I hurried down the stairs to the platform as fast as I could. But, unfortunately, the train was already pulling in. The train doors opened all at once, and the elderly lady boarded. No choice, it's going the opposite way, but I'll have to get on that train. Desperate. I raced down the stairs and barely managed to slip through the doors just as they were closing, boarding the train heading in the opposite direction to my home. Once on, I found the train packed to the brim with commuters. I had seen the elderly lady with the lost wallet board the next car over. I have to get this wallet to her before she gets off, while receiving some annoyed looks and tisks from other passengers. I apologized profusely and slowly made my way through the crowded car towards the next one. By the time I reached the elderly lady's car, 2 stations had passed. As I quickly explained how I found her wallet and came to return it, the elderly lady looked incredibly surprised. Though she appeared quite elderly, she seemed energetic and had a kind, refined face. What struck me was how her eyes widened in shock the moment she saw me. "You are such a kind person to go out of your way to return a lost wallet by boarding a train going in the opposite direction of your home." The elderly lady was so moved, thanking me repeatedly, that I became embarrassed and modestly replied, "Oh, it was nothing, just doing what anyone would." Just then, as the train was stopping at the second station, I said, "Well, this is my stop," and bid the elderly lady goodbye before hopping off the train. Having taken the train in the wrong direction, I decided to wait on the opposite platform for a train going back the way I came. That's when something strange occurred to me. How did that elderly lady know I took the train in the opposite direction, despite not having mentioned anything about myself? The elderly lady somehow knew I had taken the train in the opposite direction to return her wallet. Life is full of mysteries. With a puzzled shake of my head, I boarded the train home. The next day, as I arrived at work, as usual, my colleague Brian rushed over to my desk. "James, thank you so much. The proposal you advised me on last week, I presented it as you instructed, and we got the contract. And this morning, Mr. Smith personally called me to commend me for it. All thanks to you. Honestly, I had always thought Brian was one of those who looked down on me with a bad attitude, so his sudden change took me by surprise. I had advised Brian on numerous occasions, and this wasn't the first time a deal had gone through, but it was the first time he had expressed gratitude and thanked me like this. Being praised by Mr. Smith personally, really such a game changer. Sensing my skepticism, Brian added, "Yeah, James, the reason I came to thank you is that he told me to." He said, "This successful deal is thanks to James, a competent and exemplary supervisor. Make sure you thank him properly." Watching Brian walk away, I muttered to myself, why would he? That day was just the beginning, and from the next day on, the atmosphere around me at work began to change significantly. Without altering my work style or approach from the previous week, good news and results started coming my way, one after another. Specifically, one of our long-standing clients approached us with a proposal to embark on a major project together, and to my surprise, they nominated me as the person in charge from our company. Having worked here for about 15 years, This was the first time I had been specifically requested for a project. In the past, even if I did high-quality work, someone else always seemed to take the credit or obstruct my efforts. It felt like I had gone from being a symbol of misfortune to someone basking in the limelight. I asked Jessica, the client's representative, why she chose me as the lead person for our company, despite there being other employees available. Jessica replied, "It was because Mr. Smith recommended you." He assured us that if it's James from the System Development Department, there can be no mistake. We took the liberty of looking into your past achievements and, true to his word, found you to be an exceptionally capable individual. I was taken aback to hear once again that he had played a role in this. So, my once luckless corporate life seemed to be taking a turn for the better recently, lifting my spirits and making me grin to myself. Being appointed as the person in charge of an unprecedentedly large project for a client filled me with enthusiasm, and I dived into the preparations. This project was undoubtedly the biggest opportunity in my career, and its success would significantly enhance my reputation. I was brimming with motivation. Day after day, I stayed late at the office, fully focused on preparing for this project, creating specifications for the newly developed program, drafting various explanatory documents, preparing for presentations. I was giving it my all, drawing on every bit of strength I had. After a month of such dizzyingly busy and fulfilling days, the final presentation, where I would meet all the clients, was just 2 days away. After tirelessly working through sleepless nights, I managed to complete the new system and nearly finished the specification documents and the extensive materials for business negotiations by yesterday. On the day before the presentation, I arrived at work, trying to contain my excitement, and launched the newly completed system for a trial run. Then, I tried to open the specification document file stored on my PC, along with other files for the business negotiation presentation. But they were gone. All the files had been deleted. Moreover, all the backup files I had made as a precaution were also erased. Even more, all the documents I had printed out and piled up next to my PC just the day before had vanished without a trace. This can't be happening. What on earth is going on? I felt a chill run down my spine and couldn't help but shout out loud in panic. I searched under my desk and in my drawers, desperately looking for the stacks of documents, but they were nowhere to be found. As I was doing this, drawn by my earlier shout, some people came over, laughing amorously. When I turned towards the source of the crude laughter, there was Michael and his entourage looking down on me with scorn. "Too bad all those documents you worked so hard on, and the files on your PC. This guy threw them all away." Michael, seemingly finding the situation hilarious, burst into laughter, pointing at David, a junior employee. David was a newcomer, but, like Michael, he was from Key University and had a nasty personality, acting like Michael's lackey. "I thought your files and documents were garbage, just like you." So I deleted all the files along with the backups and threw all the paper stacks into the shredder bin. As David made his flippant remark, Michael and the rest of the group burst into uncontrollable laughter. "Haha, it's hilarious, right? Threw them all away. Now James can do his presentation. Bye-bye, business deal. Oh dear, such a big project has gone to waste. What a pity." Michael and his cronies mocked and tormented me, making a laughingstock out of me. Glaring at Michael and David, who had deleted the files, I said, "Do you have any idea what you're doing? Aren't you ashamed of yourselves for stooping to such despicable actions?" To which David brazenly replied, "Not at all. We have to nip in the bud any bad influence from our incompetent seniors, or it's us, the juniors, who end up getting crushed." Ha ha. getting told off by the new guy. But James, you've been getting a bit too cocky lately because you've been recognised a bit. You were an eyesore, so we just gave you a reality check. Go ahead and embarrass yourself in the business meeting and revert back to your mediocre self. And don't you dare get ahead of yourself ever again. Michael, seizing the moment, then added, "It is true feelings." Hearing Michael's appalling words, I realised everything. Michael, the department head of system development, was deeply resentful that I, a mere supervisor, had been appointed by the client for a big project, bypassing him. I felt his actions were clearly driven by ugly jealousy towards me. Stunned by their actions and responses, I was left speechless as Michael, with a parting shot of, "Let this be a lesson. Never overstep again. You worthless supervisor," walked away with his entourage from my desk. As I watched their retreating figures with a sense of despair, I muttered to myself, all the backup files were deleted and all the documents were thrown away. I could start over from scratch, but there's absolutely no way I can finish before the day after tomorrow's business meeting. It's all over. How could I have been so careless? I blame myself for leaving my PC unlocked and for carelessly leaving the documents by my desk. Feeling a sense of futility in hindsight, the next day I went to work feeling utterly despondent. With the business meeting now seemingly doomed, my spirit had hit rock bottom and I was overwhelmed with depression. Barely able to stand, unable to focus on work, I went to the break room alone, repeatedly sighing and holding my head in my hands embarrassingly. I felt a lump in my throat from my own inadequacy. Then someone patted my shoulder. Looking up, I saw Elizabeth, the cleaner, looking at me with concern. "Elizabeth, sorry, I'm not really in the mood for small talk right now." As I said this, Elizabeth smiled kindly, with just her eyes showing. Then she presented something she had been hiding behind her back. To my astonishment, it was the stack of documents I had printed out, which were supposed to have been thrown away by David. The specification documents for the new system, the materials for the presentation, and all the documents for the business negotiations were all there, intact. "Elizabeth, where did you find these?" surprised I asked. And Elizabeth replied, "The day before yesterday, when I was collecting trash, I found a large stack of documents in the bin for shredding, which isn't usually there. It seemed odd, so I checked and saw they were the documents you've been working so hard on every day. I thought to myself that I couldn't let such important things be shredded, so I collected and saved them all." Right there at that moment, Elizabeth appeared to me like a saint. "Elizabeth, thank you so much. With these, I can go ahead with tomorrow's presentation and negotiation. You saved me at the last minute. You're my saviour, Elizabeth. Thank you." Overwhelmed with gratitude, I couldn't help but rejoice as Elizabeth watched me with a pleased expression, nodding repeatedly as she spoke. What goes around comes around. "You're my saviour after all." Faced with Elizabeth's cryptic remark, I looked at her in bewilderment, only to see her chuckle amusingly in response. The following day, I was able to attend a presentation for the big project we were working on with our client, and thanks to the documents I managed to conduct a successful presentation. The subsequent negotiations also ended in great success, leading to contracts with several major client companies. It turned out to be one of the largest deals in the history of my company. I wanted to share this great success with Elizabeth, who had saved the documents before anyone else. When I happily arrived at work the next day, I was greeted by David, one of Michael's spiteful followers. David said to me with a sneer, "James, Mr. Smith wants to talk to you, and Michael is joining him. It seems, James, you are finally being let go." Still buzzing from the success of yesterday's negotiations, David's words felt like a cold shower. Just when I thought I was finally in a position to shine, my joy was short-lived, and now I was being fired. David mentioned that Michael was also in the CEO's office. Probably Michael had framed the deletion of my files as a result of my mishandling. That must have led to discussions of my dismissal due to a supposed lack of confidentiality management skills. I guess I'm just an unlucky guy. With a heavy heart, I made my way to the CEO's office, pondering over these thoughts in the elevator and the hallway. I knocked and entered the CEO's office. Upon entering, just as David had said, Mr. Smith and Michael were there. "Ah, James, you've come. Take a seat." Mr. Smith gestured for me to sit. Then unexpectedly he said, "You're not suited for our company. You're fired." I thought to myself in shock, this is so sudden, and screamed internally. Hearing Mr. Smith's abrupt announcement, Michael sitting next to me grinned with joy. Although I was prepared for the worst, the injustice of it all filled me with an unbearable sense of frustration. I couldn't help but question Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith, I'm fully aware that I hadn't performed perfectly. I apologize. However, I have always worked diligently for this company. Isn't a sudden dismissal too harsh? Could you at least explain the reason? Cutting off my plea, Mr. Smith said, "Hold on, James. It seems you're misunderstanding something. I wasn't talking about firing you." I exclaimed in surprise at Mr. Smith's unexpected response. "James, you're a treasure to our company. Firing you would be a loss for us." I was talking about firing Michael. At Mr. Smith's words, Michael was taken aback. "What are you saying, Mr. Smith? Why would you fire me, the manager, instead of this incompetent supervisor?" Even at this point, Michael didn't hold back his disdain for me. "It's quite the opposite, and Michael, why do you think it's only fair for you to be fired? You should know best, don't you?" "Come now," Mr. Smith shouted towards the secretary's office. Then the door to the secretary's office opened, and in came Elizabeth. Seeing her, Michael was the first to react angrily. "The cleaning lady, hey, we're having an important conversation here. Don't just barge in." Despite being yelled at by Michael, Elizabeth retorted, "Old lady, who do you think you're talking to?" With that, Elizabeth removed her mask and hat, which she never took off in public, upon seeing her face. I couldn't help but exclaim, it was definitely a face I recognized. "It's you, the lady who dropped her wallet on the train that time." When I tentatively asked, Elizabeth smiled warmly and replied, "Yes, thank you so much for that time. Thanks to you, I didn't lose my important cash cards and driver's license. You're my savior. To think that the elegant elderly lady I encountered that time was the cleaning staff I chatted with every day." Seeing my speechless surprise, Mr. Smith added with a smile, "Indeed, James. I also want to thank you for returning my mother's wallet. Though belated, I appreciate it." It seemed Michael was the most shocked by Mr. Smith's words. "My mother? Wait, is this lady really your mother?" As Michael's face turned pale with shock, Mr. Smith reprimanded him sharply. "Watch your mouth, Michael. You've been slandering someone's mother by calling her an old lady. It's because of your twisted personality that you're utterly unfit for our company." Michael, scolded by Mr. Smith, began to tremble with fear, his face turning even paler. After giving Michael a disdainful glance, Elizabeth began to explain the situation. The details were as follows. The mother, wanting to contribute to Heron's company in some way, decided to utilize her cleaning skills and began working as a cleaner. While working as a cleaner, she observed the office staff and their characters. During this time, Elizabeth was drawn to my work ethic and character. After the incident with the wallet, she had even suggested to her son that my promotion and performance evaluation be reconsidered. Moreover, Elizabeth had been keeping an eye on Michael's tyrannical behaviour and had reported everything, including the truth about the negotiation documents, to Mr. Smith. That was the essence of it. During Elizabeth's explanation, Michael's trembling grew worse, and he eventually collapsed to his knees on the floor, completely overwhelmed. This was truly a sight of utter defeat. Looking down at the pitiful sight of Michael, Mr. Smith said calmly, "Michael, you are truly despicable. Today, you're being dismissed for disciplinary reasons. But before that, apologize to James for all the trouble you've caused him, if you have any shred of conscience left as a human being." Michael, crouching on the floor and holding his head weakly, looked up and said, "James, I'm sorry for all the mean things I've done." Watching Michael break down and sob, I felt a profound sense of pity. In the end, Michael's wrongdoings were brought to light, and the board of directors unanimously decided to dismiss him for disciplinary reasons. Michael left, but his followers remained in the company. Ironically, the very next day, those who were part of Michael's faction came to me one after the other, apologizing for their past rudeness and insults. Following these events, I was promoted to the head of the System Development Department in the next personnel change. Thus, peace returned to the department. The lesson from this entire experience was that those who extend a helping hand to others in need will find others willing to help them in their own times of need. Elizabeth repaid the favour of me returning her wallet with a significant act of saving crucial documents for a business deal. It was a true realization of the saying, "Kindness begets kindness." Half a year has passed since then. As the new department head, I continue to have a good relationship with Elizabeth, Mr. Smith's mother, who still works as a cleaner from time to time. And we often enjoy chatting together as a break from work. Now, with trust from the subordinates, and favoured by Mr. Smith, I lead a smooth and successful life, a stark contrast to the unfortunate first half of my life. I'm Mike Knoffwood, the 28-year-old businessman. I work for a pretty big and famous company in my hometown. I'm part of the sales team, and there's a business drinking party almost every night. The clients seemed to really like the place I chose for the gathering, so I think it was successful. I felt a sigh of relief. My boss is whispering something to RCO. Looks like he's planning for the next place. Probably they're going to a fancy place with attractive ladies along with our client CEO. I guess these regular employees are calling it quits here. We held taxes for the harems to send them off. Our tipsy CEOs seemed to be in high spirits. We made sure nothing was left behind with seniors, and then us regular employees dispersed. My colleagues were heading off to a bar, but I'm not much of a drinker. Despite the invite, I declined and decided to head home early. I wanted to enjoy my only hobby, gaming, when I got home. As I was excitedly heading home, I heard a dispute in a side alley off the main street. Normally I ignore it, but I stopped in my tracks when I heard a young woman's voice. Squinting into the dark alley, I could see a girl about college-aged and a man about my age arguing about something. The man seemed to be forcing the girl, and she was clearly uncomfortable. "Hey, stop that." She tried to keep her voice down, but it was clear she was rejecting him. The man was holding her arm, seemingly trying to forcefully take her somewhere. The girl appeared to be about the same age as my younger sister. "Hey, maybe you shouldn't be forcing her like that," I called out quietly towards the back of the alley. The man turned around and glared at me. From just one glance, I could tell he was wearing a well-tailored suit. His tie is designer-made, His leather shoes are nicely polished. He seems like a rich kid. Back off. You're out of your league, man. Quite a mouth on him for a privileged kid. Maybe he's a rich Brad gone bad. I cynically stepped into the alley. The humidity instantly rises above the level of the main street. It's probably damp hair from the air conditioners attached to both sides of the buildings, but she seems uncomfortable, and you're acting like a thug, so I can't just ignore this. While saying that, I nonchalantly grab his hand, shielding the girl behind me. Talking circles around people is something I'm good at. "Hey Ginny, do you know this guy?" The man yells as he tries to violently grab the shoulder of the girl behind me. I shield her, making sure his hand doesn't reach her. He clicks his tongue and then attacked with a pretty heavy punch. I absolutely hate violence. I was blown to the wall of the building, hitting my back hard. I taste iron in my mouth. The man looks down at me, now slumped against the building wall. There's a vulgar grin on his face. These kinds of guys never stop at one punch. He's the type who gets excited by the violence he inflicts. Just as I try to escape, a kick to my stomach makes me groan. See, just as I thought, I nearly laugh at how well I've rated him. Just as the man clenches his fist again, the girl thrusts her smartphone screen in his face. "If you don't stop, I'm calling the police. Are you planning to make your dad clean up the mess again?" She says this with a voice so cold, it's like she's mocking him. Maybe he didn't believe she'd actually call the police, because his fist clenches tighter. Without hesitation, she starts using her smartphone. From the speakerphone, you can hear the voice of a police officer answering a 911 call. He keeps asking, "What's your emergency?" The man lowers the fist he'd raised and clicks his tongue. "Don't run, Jenny." The man says this and runs off down the alley. She ends the call only after making sure he's gone. "We should move before the police arrive. You don't want any more trouble, right?" She grabs my arm to help me up and then lends me her shoulder as I wobble. Her side profile is a real beauty, but with a hint of darkness, a pure yet mysterious beauty. By the time we reach a bench in a park, away from the alley, we're both sweating. She made me sit on the bench and buys a couple of bottles of water from a vending machine. She gave me one and uses the other to dampen her handkerchief and gently wipes my face. It burns my mouth with the water she gave me, but I can still taste iron. It looks like I've cut the inside of my mouth quite a bit. "We need to get you to a hospital. You're bleeding." She says this with a worried look while holding the cold handkerchief to my wounds. "I'm fine. It's not as painful as it looks." "Are you hurt anywhere?" In my words, she opens her eyes wide in surprise, then tilting her head slightly, she looks at me in puzzlement. Did I say something strange? Just as I was about to open my mouth again, her slender hand moved swiftly. Before I knew it, my suit jacket was whisked away. "Excuse me," suddenly stripped of my jacket, I was flustered. "I'll get it cleaned and return it." "I'm sorry, but can you please provide your contact details?" She said this in a polite but firm tone. She quickly tossed over items that were in the pocket. When she found a business card holder in an inner pocket, she smiled. "I'll take a business card if you don't mind." "Pardon me." She promptly pulled out a card, and she tossed it over to me. She took the business card, pausing for a moment. "I'll be in touch. A call from a college girl must be a nightmare. Give me your number." It seemed like I had run into a charming thief. As I told her my number, she repeated it without taking a note. She then introduced herself as Guinea Garcia. Just as I was about to say that the cleaning wasn't necessary, my phone started ringing. The caller ID prominently displayed my boss's name. The message was urgent. The CEO of a client company was drunk, and I was needed for help. "Sorry, I got some work to do. I left her in the park as I rushed off. It was regrettable, but I had no choice." She watched me silently from within the park until I hailed a taxi and got in. A week later, I received a call from the charming thief during my lunch break. She must have timed it to catch me on my break. I didn't recognize the number, but I had a hunch it might be her. "The cleaning is done, so when can we meet?" she asked. I told her I would be free after work tomorrow. "I'll send you the meeting place via text," and she hung up the call. The meeting place she texted was a restaurant I'm not familiar with. Her message sighed as a token of my appreciation. "Let's have a meal. It's a restaurant picked by a college student, so it probably won't be anything too fancy." I prepared a bit of extra cash in my wallet and headed to the designated restaurant the next day. And now I'm scared. The restaurant is not for students, and I was led to a private room hidden behind a concealed door. Frozen in place, I was sitting rigidly when she arrived a little late. "I'm sorry for making you wait," she apologized, bowing her head. I barely managed to respond with a weak, "It's fine." She sat down on the pulled-out chair like usual and ordered the chef's recommended course. Dishes that I've never tasted before appeared, delighting both my eyes and palate. Like magic, drinks were refilled at just the right timing, and the friendly waiter helped to ease my tension. The final dessert was served in front of me, and cheese was placed before her. Being a lover of sweet things, it was the best cake I've ever had in my life. You're not having the cake?" "I don't like sweets," she admitted, her face darkening a bit. "I used to be fine with it," she added with a smile. "Taste changes, we grow, and not every girl in the world loves cake." I simply responded, shrugging it off at the time. During the meal, we had all sorts of conversations. The guy who had bothered her turned out to be her fiancé, Jenny. She talked about marrying right after graduating from college, but she didn't seem happy about it. I could easily tell something was going on. "Aren't you too young to be getting married already?" I blurted out. Jenny merely smiled awkwardly in response to my question, not saying a word. She seemed resigned, and her smile could also be interpreted as a knowing smirk. In just 2.5 hours, I found myself wanting to know more about her. When I reached for my card to tackle the bill I was dreading, I was told it had already been paid. "It's on me as you helped me," she said with a smile, handing me my freshly cleaned jacket. As we left the restaurant, she quickly said goodbye and began to leave. "Wait, I have a proposal," I blurted out, desperately wanting to keep her from leaving. Upon being called, Christine slowly turned around. The sight of her looking straight at me was breathtakingly beautiful. "If you get married soon, let's do the things you won't be able to do once you're married," I said. She looked surprised at my words, her eyes widening. It was a bold proposal, but it was all I could think of. Jenny, who is set to marry that guy right after graduation, and clearly it wasn't a marriage she wanted, so I thought why not enjoy her freedom until she gets married. I wanted to see her smiling, preferably by my side. "What a proposal," she said, her voice filled with a hint of disbelief. Suddenly, I felt embarrassed. When I timidly asked, "So is it a no-go?" Ginny shook her head. "Where are you taking me for our fun day out?" she asked with excitement. I was relieved to see her anticipation. "Well, let's start planning then," I said, and she nodded in agreement. And just like that, she smoothly linked her arm with mine. Thus began our little game of playing lovers. From that day, Jenny and I went on many dates in various places. There was no rule as to who should ask, but it was always me inviting and her accepting. There were a lot of things I learned from our numerous dates. She was more of a sheltered lady than I had imagined. She was too excited with the aquarium and being childish as she wanted to touch penguins. At the zoo, she fussed about wanting to take home a baby lion. During a horse riding, Jenny, an experienced rider, left me behind and ran into the forest. I remember feeling awkward when she showed up in a summer dress for the county fair. I was forced to buy a cotton candy that was 3 times the size of her face, but she remembered that she hated sweet things, which made me burst into laughter. Her persona was completely different from when we first met, and I was constantly surprised. That day, we went to a solo exhibition by a female woodcarver who specializes in animal carvings. She enjoyed sitting on a life-sized orangutan carving and playing with the kids. I found the scene somewhat heartwarming and watched while leaning against the wall. "Oh, teacher, hello." Suddenly I turned toward the sound. There was a familiar-faced boy grinning at me. "Hey, are you here with your family?" I noticed a girl holding his hand. He nodded with a hearty smile. "You're a teacher?" Out of nowhere, Jenny, who had returned, asked with curiosity. "Oh, are you the teacher's girlfriend?" "He's a boxing teacher," the boy responded clearly to Ginny's question. "In fact, I'm good at boxing, and I teach grade school kids at the gym run by an old college." Jenny stared at me in surprise, learning this new side of me she wasn't aware of. It was quite embarrassing being stared at so intently. Ginny watched the boy energetically say goodbye and run back to his parents. "You could have hid back, but you didn't," she murmured to herself. I knew she was talking about the time when we first met. "Why didn't you get back?" she asked, suddenly serious. Taken aback, I looked at Rachel. Her face was very serious. "I just don't like hitting people," I confessed. It may have sounded contradictory, but that was how I truly felt. I knew the pain of hitting someone and being hit. That's why I didn't like hitting people. I think this hesitation was the reason I was always the runner-up. During my school days, I was a runner-up in every competition. I could never fully commit to winning. Every time I came in second place, I felt sorry for my family who was cheering for me. "Would you say the same thing even when you absolutely need to hit back?" she asked in a cold voice, reminding me of when we first met. I felt a chasm between Jenny and me unbridgeable, as if we were standing on opposite cliffs overlooking a deep valley. I couldn't answer her question. Ever since our date at the art show, I had lost contact with Jenny. A week had passed. There was no response to my calls or emails. She used to pick up on the first ring. I was worried that something might have happened. Perhaps I had been written off because I couldn't answer a question. At the time, I was anxious to see her again. Just as I was about to try to contact her again, a colleague called out to me. He delivered a message that the director wanted me in his office. I hadn't made any mistakes at work. I put on the jacket I had taken off and knocked on the door to the boss's office. I was told in a low voice to come in. The boss's office, where the boss and the director and the CEO of a client company, and one more person, the man who had been bothering Jenny, was sitting back on the sofa. "I'm disappointed in you trying to steal my nephew's fiancée," said the boss. So, the man who was bothering Jenny was the boss's nephew. The client company CEO also looked stern. As I stood there dumbfounded, the boss explained, Jenny was the daughter of a client company CEO and the boss's nephew's fiancée. He emphasized that their marriage was necessary to strengthen the partnership. It seems like they were insisting on a marriage to expand their companies. I was taken aback, wondering what they were talking about. So in short, the CEO's nephew desperately wants her, and he got the company involved, right? The truth just slipped out of my mouth. I felt the temperature in the CEO's office rise dramatically. The CEO of our client company was a person of not no great reputation. I heard that originally the current CEO's brother was the CEO, but he was kicked out and the current CEO took his seat. He had mistresses here and there and ran the company recklessly, or so the rumours went. That's enough. I want you to quit the company. We can't afford to keep a thief cat in the company. I'm disgusted by the CEO's ridiculous comment. Next to that CEO, the CEO of the client company is nodding deeply. He says he can't do business with a company where thief cats are present. Personal life and work are separate matters. Annoyed at the nephew grinning at me, I say to the boss, I don't want to give up on myself, who has been working hard till now here. I thought this is the time to become desperate. I thought I'm fed up with giving up on Guinea and my job. I'm not interested in your opinion. This is my company, and I don't need you. The CEO points to the exit door and tells me to leave. At that moment, the door he pointed at is opened without a knock. What the hell? We're having an important conversation. The CEO immediately yells at the person who opened the door. However, the next moment, everyone in the CEO's office was stunned and couldn't move. It's been a while, Uncle. My father sends his regards, Jenny said to the CEO without a smile. The boss's nephew, my fiancé, is stunned. Was it you, Uncle, who was secretly sniffing around me, or was it my fiancé? It wasn't until Jenny told me that I realised. The CEOs found out about Jenny and my relationship because someone was sniffing around us. Probably someone in this room hired a detective and investigated, and I was caught. You're also to blame, meeting secretly with Mike. It's irresponsible behaviour while engaged. Guinea snorts at the CEO's words. It was clear that she was looking down on everyone except me. The CEO of the client company warns Jenny, don't meddle. Guinea looks at me and smiles a little. I'll handle this. When Jenny declared that to me, she threw a bundle of documents at the client company's CEO. You're fired, CEO Williams. Jenny said to CEO Williams with cold, icy eyes. CEO Williams, flustered, flips through the documents thrown at him. With each page he turns, his face turns paler. My brother is the CEO from today, Ginny informs her fiancé. Incredible. Ginny conspired with a real brother and took over their father's company, investing in her father's company from her company and gradually buying up shares behind. We'll take back my father's company. Ginny glanced at her fiancé, who was totally in shock, and thrust documents at him too. The words compensation were written. I'll claim damages for all the mental distress you've caused, Ginny informs her fiancé. Then her gaze shifted to our company's CEO. He flinches slightly. Mr. Mike, I will poach you for our company. Brace yourself. I will bring down this place too, Jenny says, her mouth the only part of her that's smiling. Her eyes are not. Is this your idea of revenge? Hearing CEO Williams's squeezing voice, a big smile appeared on Jenny's face. If you compare it with what you've done to my family, it's nothing. The real hell starts now. In truth, Jenny was CEO Williams's daughter, but his niece. Her biological father was the CEO who was ousted by Williams. Jenny's father, having lost control of the company, died from a combination of stress and overwork. Seemingly her mother, who had been part of a loving couple, died of illness not long after. Only Jenny and her brother were left. Jenny was taken in by CEO Williams, and her brother was put into a facility. It's likely CEO Williams adopted Jenny because he thought she could be a useful pawn in the future. He probably never imagined that she would turn on him. Jenny had been patiently waiting for a moment of revenge. As CEO Williams collapses in defeat, Ginny looks at him once, then extends a hand to me. "Welcome to our company, Mr. Mike." Just as she had declared, Jenny set out to destroy the company. Where I had been working, the employees tremble at the sight of her relentless advance with no hesitation or doubt. I started working as a secretary to the CEO at Ginny's company. The CEO is Jenny's real brother, Mr. James. He's the same age as me. The new job was tough in many ways, but somehow I managed. The company seemed to be changing into a more pleasant workplace, freed from dictatorship. I think the brighter expressions of the employees are proof of that. I would love to say everything is going well, but there's one thing that worries me. Jenny has been avoiding me. Ever since the incident in the CEO's office, she has been actively ignoring me. Even when we pass in the hallway, she just acts as if I don't exist. Just when I'm trying to find a way to talk to her, CEO James shows up. "Do you know what a Savannah cat is, Mike?" Confused by the unrelated topic, I tilt my head. A Savannah cat is a breed of cat born from the crossbreeding of a serval cat and a domestic cat. It's about the size of a dog. Depending on the breed, it is necessary to register with the local government to keep one. That large, mountain lion-like cat, right? They're rare in Japan, I reply. Mr. James then asks me to somehow arrange for a Savannah kitten. As the CEO's secretary, it's not unusual to be rallied upon for personal matters as well as work. James, being the same age as me, often makes unusual requests. I thought it would cheer Kado up. She hasn't been her usual self lately, he says with a look of concern. Indeed, if I showed Jenny who demanded to keep a baby lion, a Savannah cat, she'd be ecstatic. Sure thing, Mr. James. I'm pretty indulgent towards Ginny. Understood. I'll look into it right away and prepare a cake that she would like. It's her birthday soon. When I heard cake, I was surprised. Chelsea is supposed to dislike sweets. Mr. James should know that Ginny doesn't like sweets and can't eat them right. But a cake on my words, Mr. James seemed taken aback and sat down on the spot, scratching his head. I was taken aback by his sudden strange behaviour. Holding his head, Mr. James muttered, "That girl, what a fool." Apparently, when Jenny was little, she loved cakes. When her family got together for her birthdays, she would beg her father for various types of cakes. Even when the company was taken over, her father would still buy her a cake. Then, the day after Ginny's birthday, her father collapsed and never came back. Ginny believes it's all her fault. Mr. James told me that she thinks if she endures her favourite, her father will come to see her. Mr. James never expected that even now, as a college student, she would still hold on to that wish, to take back the company, to crush the trading company that drove her father to ruin. Jenny, who coldly gets everything done, is still a young girl who just wants to see her father. When I think about how much she's sacrificed to regain happiness, I feel like tears will overflow. I promised Mr. James about the Savannah cat and pleaded with him to tell me where Jenny was. I just want to talk to her. I drove to the place Mr. James told me. The personal exhibition we went to together is on its final day, and Jenny is said to be there. In the exhibition room, filled with the excited voices of children, I find Chelsea lost in thought. She was staring at a family looking at a wooden bear, seemingly enjoying themselves. Her profile looks expressionless, yet it also seems like she could burst into tears any moment. Found her. I gently whispered and gripped her hand so she couldn't run away. Jenny, who looked back in surprise, had noticeably lost weight since I last saw her. "Why are you avoiding me?" She shudders at my question. I stopped her from trying to run away by tightly gripping her hand. With a resigned look, she relaxed and said in a small voice, "Because you hate hitting, don't you?" Ginny continued in a small voice, thinking I despised her because I hate hitting. Her voice was shaking slightly. "I hate and abhor hitting, but it depends on the time and place. I've changed my mind a bit. I spoke to Jenny as gently as possible. If it's for you, I'm sure I can handle it." Upon hearing my words, Ginny started shedding tears. She told me she feels terrible for affecting innocent employees' families by taking over companies, but she always acted tough to show that the person she resents is herself. She says she's prepared to carry all the blame and live her life. "Is there anything I can do for you?" I gently asked the crying girl. Then, in a small voice, she replied, "Stay by me like my dad. Don't disappear. Always be by my side." I wanted to hold her right away, but I restrained myself. Instead, I put a lot of strength into the hand we were holding. "Understood. I'll always be by your side, Jenny. Can you smile at me every day?" "And my question," Jenny cried and nodded many times. While watching her tears, I made a promise to myself. I will never make her cry again after today. I'd even import a savannah cat if it's for her. Surely, she'll hug the baked cat and show me a full-faced smile. The more, the merrier when it comes to family, right? As I muttered this, looking at families around us, Ginny's face turned beet red. Isn't it a bit early for that? Not at all, I think, about our way home from the art exhibition. I will buy one at a jewellery shop on the way. I was thinking about this, looking at Jenny's blushing face. Who would have thought that our meeting that day would lead to this? I had no idea back then. Now, I'm grateful to God for our encounter that day.